Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman.
Tyler Gould, man, how are you?
I'm good, man. Look, history happens quick on a podcast that's only been around for a few months, like everything is a milestone, but I feel like tonight some things happened that changed the landscape of richest men in town, probably moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. These are some exciting times in richest men in town land. Just thinking of some of the conversations that we're having about things that are coming in the windshield, right? Coming down the road in the future. But tonight we invited our first female guest on board.
Yeah. So look, we had Katie Sellers on the show tonight. She is the daughter of John Brandeburg, who is a man that you know well. I don't really know John. John has passed away. You were very close with John, and Katie kind of came on, talked a lot about her dad and paid tribute to her dad. But boy, did she teach us some lessons tonight, and that were powerful. What stood out to you tonight with our time with Katie Sellers?
Yeah, best laid plans, right? I went in thinking one thing. I know immediately in our pre-show conference call, even, we looked at each other like, hold up. Yeah. Like, Katie Sellers has an amazing dad, amazing mom, amazing story.
Yeah.
We were going in with the intention of kind of paying tribute to that legacy of her father who did pass away. And then all of a sudden, Katie started revealing herself as a teacher of truth, right? As a holder of some pretty amazing nuggets of things that really spoke to our heart, spoke to our mind tonight. Katie is a powerful kind of force of nature, right? Yeah. I mean, she shares about grief. She shares about divorce. She shares about parenting strategies.
Yeah.
Like how to teach and how to parent and how to do that in all things centered right in the middle of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right. Coming from a place of faith. Faith doesn't really come up in our conversation, but she's walking it.
But it's woven throughout, right?
It's woven throughout. And she teaches of the power of the tools that she's learned participating in therapy.
Yeah.
And how that's been a blessing to her life. And just some of those things that we keep chipping away at, right? Some cultural things or some stigmas that we're sensitive of and we're aware of. Man, it's all out tonight with Katie Sellers. Katie Sellers tells it how it is. Comes from a place of strength through pain.
Yeah.
Which we're about, right? Because we are about being better. She paints this idea of rich life being better than a joyful life.
Yeah.
My eyes opened up wide, edge of my seat when she started talking about those things. And like any great episode, there's not a lot of us in this. We sit back, we're sipping a Pepsi, listening to Katie Sellers just drop it and teach powerfully and mark our calendar. That girl's coming back.
Yeah. It's, I think the winning formula that we've figured out is less of you and I is a good thing. So,
and I think we stumbled on something else, right? I think ladies have something to teach us about living this rich life. We've talked about the ladies. We talked about the support that the women in our life have had and the influence that they've had.
Yeah.
But this really opens up everything. This could be the episode that really changes everything.
Yeah, I agree. I loved it tonight. I think that, we say this all the time after our episodes, to listen and take some notes or find something that stands out to you. I will tell you that if you sat down and you tuned into this episode and you just sat intentionally to try to find something that would strike you, there would be multiple opportunities. Tonight I'm walking away not just edified, but I'm excited about the conversation that we had. And I love that feeling that the energy that Katie brought to the show tonight.
Yeah. Can I just be true to the tribute though?
Yeah.
It is about the thing that was in my heart reaching out to Katie was a love for her father. And I just want to share this with you. I didn't share it with her. It's an emotional thing. When I got the call from John telling me that his days were numbered.
Yeah.
You think about that, right? And from a perspective of trying to live this life the best that we can, that call kind of took me to my knees, and I sat down and penned something out, and I'm just going to share it with you, right?
Yeah, please.
All right. This was a Facebook post that I put up after I found out that John was dying of cancer. John Brandeburg, you will be missed. I went to bed thinking about what you have meant to so many, and I woke up with these words. What if I was told I was dying, like my dear friend was told the other day? In that instant, the innumerable tomorrows would at once fit in the palm of one hand. Would I rage against the dying of the light like I'd always dreamed I would? Would I yield and submit? Would I crumble like things built by men always do? Would I stand tall on the shoulders of those who made me the man that I am, as the am fades to was? Would this flame that was lit years ago sputter and ebb? Or would it surge brighter and brighter until it was no more lit? Is the end of the wick brighter than the rest? Like the finale of fireworks. I'll miss fireworks, and ocean mist, and driving fast with windows down, and that song playing loud, and her hand in mine. Hard to know what dying will be like, or is it? If life was laced in love, then shouldn't love be present as life ends? What if in the end love was all that was left? What if dying burned the rest like dross? Impurities, trivialities, sins, and other mortal nonsense gone, and in its place pure love remained. What if I just loved as I was dying? Nothing else. Just loved with all that was left, kissed my wife and children, hugged them tight and held them close to me, and talked of only gilded days from ago. Every visitor was a friend who dropped everything to say goodbye, to say thanks, to say I love you. What if we all lived every day to die, like the sun rises to set? No one says that was a pretty noon. Oh, but a sunset? Same sun, same light, same energy, just lower in the sky. People stop their cars and pull over to watch a beautiful end. And clouds, gray and menacing, become something else at sunset. Shades of gray turns to pinks, purples, and reds. I'll miss sunsets. So let me rage, or let me yield. I may crumble, I may stand, but know this. On that day of fading away, I will love with all that I am. And when that God who loved me first calls me home, I'll be filled with love. And in that glorious death, all that will see and hear it will be filled in an instant with a desire to live. Thanks, John. Godspeed, my friend, until we meet again. John Brandeburg.
Listen.
Katie Sellers, a product of John Brandeburg.
Let's end it right there. No more needs to be said. Enjoy a tribute to John Brandeburg with Katie Sellers on the Richest Men in Town. What is going on in the world of Mike Freeman? That's what I got to know.
All right, Tyler Gould. I'm sitting here with my Richest Men in Town swag on. It is a historical night.
Yes,
right?
It is.
A historic event is about to happen.
Yeah.
I know history and a show that's only a couple months old doesn't really jive, right? Doesn't really go very well together. But tonight we are opening up and we have Katie Sellers joining us.
Yeah.
If our listeners are catching on that Katie is a girl's name, they are correct.
Yes.
The richest men in town are welcoming in our first female guest tonight.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about it, man. Super excited.
So Katie's backstory is Katie is the daughter of one of my truly influential, good guy friends. John Brandeburg passed away from cancer. Still remember the day he called me and told me that he had days to live. That's a call you don't get a lot. Yeah. And so John's been on my mind as we've gone through this podcast.
Yeah.
Because he's like an OG richest men in town.
Yeah.
Right? I think about the things that he taught me. And so we reached out to Katie saying, hey, Katie, could you come on and talk about your dad?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, in our pre-show call with Katie, I'm excited to bring Katie on and talk about her dad. I'm excited to talk to Katie about Katie.
100%. Like, look, I think we talked to Katie about this last night a little bit and we brought this up, but we are all a product of our surroundings, right? And we're a product of the people of influence in our lives. And, I met John once or twice. I didn't know John. But I feel like I know John just because you've mentioned a lot of things that John has taught you over the years. And so I'm excited about that, but Katie is the product of John. And I want to know Katie. I want to know what makes Katie tick. I want to know, just in that brief pre-show call we had, there's a lot there. And I'm just excited for, to get to know people, Mike. And that's one of the things that we've always talked about with the richest men in town is just to be curious, to get to know people. And everybody has a story and some lessons for us to learn. And Katie's going to bring some tonight for us.
Yeah, but so let's get into your head a little bit, right? Yeah. As you're going into this episode, I think you're right. We are all a product of the people in our lives.
Yeah.
I think that people exert influence, good, bad, ugly.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And we're all part of that too. Good, bad, and ugly. Right.
And I think that these episodes, this experience has confirmed some things. We've got some exciting things happening in richest men in town land. And we're looking forward to rolling this thing out a little bit. We always talk that this is beyond podcast, that this is a community. I think tonight is a big step in really expanding that community.
Yeah.
But we're also, we're trying to remove limits so this thing becomes that movement.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So people can look around and they can realize that they are a product of the people in their lives, and they can surround themselves with better people. Right?
Yeah,
I think that's the idea.
For sure.
We are a product of those people. And what's in your mind as you thought about tonight's episode coming in? What's moving in you right now?
Yeah, I'm excited. Just a couple things that I have in my mind. Look, you and I are lucky guys in that we both married great women, right?
Kelly Freeman's birthday was last night.
Happy birthday, Kelly Freeman.
Happy birthday.
And,
we've said before this show wouldn't happen without him. So thank you.
Amen, brother. So we're lucky in that regard, and I, we talk about people that have influenced us and people that have helped us along the way. I've been married 24 years in February, and I will say that I'm better in 24 years because of my wife, right? The things that she's taught me, and her willingness to kind of redirect me at times, and I'm grateful for that. And look, I grew up with 4 sisters. I grew up with the mom, right? That pushed me in the right direction. And I'm excited to have Katie come and talk about her experiences, because there's a richness there that belongs in our town. And I'm excited about it, man.
So I shot you this text earlier today.
Yeah.
Right. This quote, came across it. A nice nin says, life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage.
Yeah.
Last time we played a little word association with the word power. When you think of courage, what comes to mind?
G.I. Joe. I mean, you're like, we're going 80s cartoons in every one of these word associations. No, I think, I think just the ability to, when I think of courage, I think that word has maybe evolved for me over the years, but now I think about, just the willingness to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and look for the growth that comes of those situations. You know, to me, that's courage. So yeah, I mean, you know, that there's a lot of courageous people, right? We talked to Kiefer Marino and we talked to Sergio Carzoli, who talked about their military experience, right? And we have other guests that have gone through some things that are courageous, but I think just the willingness to put yourself in uncomfortable situations outside of your boundaries and then look for the growth opportunities.
So if I were to look back on your movie, right? If I were to look back on your life, you know, 60, 70 years from now, when you lay it down, were there moments where you didn't necessarily rise to the challenge with courage?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that like shrinking from things is like a natural sort of, it's like the flinch, you know what I mean? Like something's coming at you. And I think maybe my natural instinct in several situations throughout life has been to duck, right? And get out of the way and try to not be seen. But but then I compare that with the times when I've maybe even reluctantly and probably mostly reluctantly stepped out of my comfort zone. I feel power in those moments. You know what I mean?
And we learn, right? We learn from those moments when we did shrink. We look back and we're like, oh, that was small.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Why was I small in that moment? I need to step up. And the next time you see that opportunity, that shrink moment comes up. It's like, nope, not doing
100%.
that.
Yeah.
Not doing that. Going in and I gotta be big this time.
Yeah. I totally, I mean, I think that's the whole journey that we're on, right? Is the hope is that we know we're going to shrink at times. We know we're going to be scared. We know we're going to fail. But the hope is that the next time it comes around, we learn from that shrink. We learn from the fail. We learn from those things, and we get a little bit better. Maybe we don't perfect it the next go around. We get a little bit better. You know, I'm still working on it, man.
Well, I think that those two thoughts come together. Your thoughts of the influence of women in your life, and then the idea of that courage. Because I think of the experiences where I didn't have courage and I borrowed it from my wife.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right? I did not believe in me, and she's looking at me like, I'm your number one fan. You got this.
Hey man.
And I'm like, can I borrow that for a bit?
Yeah.
I think of Sergio Carzoli, right? Coming back from the service and his wife's like right there, like, okay, you're going to college, you're going to get a degree, like boom, boom, boom. You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that's a big deal, man. And, we've talked about your mom a lot on this podcast as well. And I don't know your mom well, but I think through you, I know her enough to know that she was probably there kicking in the shorts and pushing you on and cheering you on when you were younger, right?
Yeah, so true. But again, going to that product.
Yeah.
You don't know my mom, but you know me.
For sure. Yeah.
You don't know John. I guarantee you, as you meet Katie Sellers, you're going to know John.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of my excitement is, I want to meet Katie and dissect where all of this comes together and why she is the powerful person that she is. And John's going to be found all throughout that, Yeah. So it's really cool.
Last thought on the courage. When I think of that word courage, I think of Come Ye Saints.
Yeah.
That line, right?
Yeah.
Fresh courage take. Yeah. Our God will never us forsake.
Yeah.
And how important is that word fresh courage in 2020? Right? When you've done, you feel like you've had these battles and it's like, okay, I'll fight this because it's only going to be around for a couple months. And these things are always lingering there. So
totally,
finding that place to find and take some fresh courage. Speaking of some fresh courage, let's let Katie into this place and let's see what we can learn. Let's be learners tonight, Tyler.
Why
Gould.
not? You know what? Let's do it.
Why not?
Yeah. Katie.
Hi.
How are you?
Katie Sellers, welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. How the heck are you?
Oh, I'm so good. The baby, 9-month-old, is now in the room with the 4-year-old. Tonight is the first night.
Oh, this is a historic night.
This is a big deal.
That is a big deal. Wow, that's awesome.
So yeah.
Hey, Tyler Gould, do you remember
good.
those days? You remember those days?
I do remember those days. And as a matter of fact, let me just say this. Like, I was just thinking, it's Halloween, right? And Halloween in my house for years has been carving pumpkins, hanging decorations, like for years. And this year, everyone has plans. And I'm like looking at people like, are we not going to go to a pumpkin patch? Like, what is happening? You know, so I love those days when the kids are young. I mean, those fun times.
Hey, Katie,
yeah, it's fun.
Katie, he's not going to tell you this, but the Gould home for a long time was the party hotspot for Halloween.
Okay, you're talking to the right person. I love Halloween.
Nothing beats a Gould Halloween party,
That's
man.
awesome.
There were some epic nights, some epic theme nights. Michael Jackson.
There was a Michael Jackson night. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
love it.
I just came across some pictures of Mike dressed up in one of our parties. So there's some good stuff. You know,
that's great.
Our political careers are probably over, but
yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of pictures that would need to go away if I were to run for any public office for sure.
That's great.
Hey, Katie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And as you're aware, you're jumping on a moving train, right? We are lit up about the opportunity to talk to you tonight.
Oh, thank you.
For lots of reasons. It's a historic night in your home where you've got 2 kids sleeping in the same room, hopefully sleeping tonight. Yeah. But you are breaking the gender barrier in the Richest Men in Town podcast. So props to you. We were talking before you came on. We like to just throw some things out there, and I came across a quote that I texted Tyler today, and it's been on my mind. Author Anais Nin says, "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." And so we've been reminiscing and just thinking back on life when life's given us those situations where courage is needed. And sometimes we've shrank, right? Sometimes we shrink back, and sometimes we get scared or we play small. Tyler and I both admitted that sometimes we go to our wives and borrow their courage, right? We borrow the belief that other people have in us, and try that on to help us find that courage. As you think about your life, could you let us in on what courage looks like for Katie Sellers?
Oh, wow. Yeah, courage is actually hard for me. I err on the side of, I mean, you'd think that I wouldn't be that way, being the daughter of who we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. but yeah, courage, I often find myself wanting to hold back as I've gotten older, for sure. So this looks like courage for me, doing this, you know?
Hey, so when I reach out to you, right? When I reach out to you, like, here's the backstory. I loved your father.
Yeah.
Your father is on my Mount Rushmore of people just in general. We were talking earlier too, before you joined, about how we are a product of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And how Tyler may not know my mom, but he knows me. And if he knows me by extension, he's gonna, when he meets my mom, he's gonna be like, yep, that's why Mike is that way.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And as we hang out with you, Tyler didn't know your dad too well, but he's gonna get a lesson in who John is just by hanging out with you. But when I reach out to you and say, hey, we got this podcast, me and another crazy guy think it's kind of fun to just talk to people about their lives.
Yeah.
And we would love to sit down and talk to you about being John Brandeburg's daughter and where you're at in life. What thoughts ran through your mind with the invitation?
Well, first of all, I was very flattered. And I also wasn't surprised that you wanted to talk about my dad, just because he's phenomenal. Great guy. But I was a little confused. I am a woman. I could be the richest woman in town, yes. But I don't know what it's like to be the richest man in town. But yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime somebody wants to tribute somebody you love dearly who's passed away, you're totally willing to do it, even though it might be a little scary and make you have to be a little courageous.
Yeah, well, thank you for the courage. And I just got to say too, props to you for doing some homework. We jumped on the call to check in with you before we do this, and the idea that you invested some time and listened to a couple of episodes on our program. We're flattered by that, but it really is great. Important, because that helps you understand what we're about.
Yeah.
Because Tyler and I are about better, like, period. And if we can talk to you about your dad and learn lessons to be better dads, fantastic. I will tell you, we were super impressed with our pre-show call, and we're going to be talking to you about your dad, but we know that your own life, you have some lessons and you have some things that can teach us how to be better. So
thank you.
Looking forward to it.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I'm excited about it. So let me ask you. Let's talk to you about your dad for a minute here. Sure. But let's kind of start at the beginning. What was growing up with your dad like? What are some memories you have as a young girl growing up with John Brandeburg?
Oh wow. Okay, so John Brandeburg is definitely, he's a rare bird. That's what I like to call him. He's just this rare breed of a man. And, what's funny is I just didn't really get that until I grew up and left the home. I didn't get that most dads were not like how he was. The minute he would walk into a room, wherever he was, it was like all the faces would turn towards him. He just drew people in, and he had this ability to make anyone feel comfortable, whoever he was talking to. It didn't matter what you looked like, what religion you were. It didn't matter. What mattered is that you were a person. And he lit up the room. But he was my dad. And when your dad's like that, kind of all the time.
always on. Yeah.
He was kind of always on. I mean, there are the moments at the end of the day to come home. And for some reason at the end of the day, he would come home from work. He was an elementary school teacher, and he would take a nap laying down on the floor with his feet up on the couch, like upside down with his legs up on the couch like that, and that's how he would take a nap after work. So even in his way of resting, he was just sort of,
he was out there.
He was out there a little bit.
Love it.
So yeah, growing up with a dad like him was wonderful. He was loving. He was present. He was totally a present dad. He was not the type of dad who was just like, I pay the bills and come home and eat and then go to sleep. He wasn't that type of dad. He was invested, my parents were very different. My mom is more of the introverted artist type, and my dad is the extroverted people person and musician. And
both super creative people.
Both
right?
amazing.
It's like when creative
people.
Powerhouses get married. Like,
yes.
Wow.
Yes. That's awesome.
And my mom was a quilting author. So she designed quilts and wrote like 20 books and would go so she had her business, and my dad was the teacher and the musician and the people guy. And so, I kind of had these two powerhouse type people. They're very different. But I like to think that I kind of have this great mix of them in me. And our situation too is kind of unique. My dad was previously married, mom was previously married, and they both have children from their first marriages, and I am theirs. So his, hers, and their situation. So I'm I used to say I was like the Band-Aid or the glue that kept the family together. It's all because of me.
You're the bridge.
I'm the bridge. Which is kind of an interesting thing, to be like the youngest. I'm the youngest of everybody, but I'm also the only between them. And I'm a girl. So I was kind of, I wouldn't say doted over, but maybe a little bit spoiled.
Nothing wrong with that.
I spent most of my childhood. So my brother, my mom's son, Travis, he's 9 years older than me. And then my dad's son is JD, is 16 years older than me. And so I was kind of an only child for most of like my teen years. From the time I was 9 on. I just, I was hanging out, doing the thing. It was me and my parents. So we'd go out to dinner, go to movies together. It was fun, And of course, like there were times where I'm like, why can't you have another child so I could not be alone? But I wasn't alone. I had them, and I have great relationships with my brothers now. Now that we're older and that. So so that's, I guess, a little bit about what my life was like as a kid.
Katie, what is being present look like? You said your dad was present. What does that look like when you were a girl growing up?
Yeah. So a couple stories come to mind. I because he was a musician, I ultimately ended up going the music route as well. And awesome. He came to every performance. He participated in callings at church. He, was there for me when I needed him. There were moments in my life where I felt like I could go to him more than I maybe could have gone to my mom. He was somebody who I felt a connection to, not just you're my dad, but there was this level of he was present in a way that he took time to talk with me. I remember, as a teacher, he was a teacher, right? He was very clear that he wanted to be my dad. He didn't want to be my teacher. And sometimes I think I felt this pressure that maybe he wanted to be my teacher. But I knew, like, now looking back, I'm like, no, he didn't want to do that. I don't want to do that for my children. And I'm an educator as well. And so, I don't want to be my children's teacher. I want to be their guide in life as their parent. And he really was that for me. Both my parents were really, I felt like I could talk to both of them. And so, there was a level of trust that because he would answer real questions for me, and we would have sincere conversation at the dinner table, not just how was your day, just in passing.
If I could just highlight that.
Yeah.
and piggyback on that. My experiences, as I think about the experiences I had with your dad, I 100% agree with evidence and stories that would back that up. So Tyler, he's the guy that would turn to you and ask you the questions that we ask guests on this show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Out of no, like just with intentionality, right? And not like to fill space, not to like strike up conversation to, so that there wasn't a silence, genuinely interested in who you were, your walk, your talk, the choices that you made. But there was some great intentionality.
Let me ask you this question,
Yeah.
Mike and Katie. I want you both to think about this for a second, because here's a quote that I came across today, and I think I sent this to you, Mike, earlier, but this was Spencer W. Kimball. Okay. And he says, if you were to select just 2 or 3 individuals in your life who have been most influential, what specifically did they do that was helpful to you at a critical or important time in your life? And then he goes on reflecting for a few moments, you are apt to conclude that such a person really cared for you, that he or she taught you something you needed to know. And he says, reflect now upon your own performance. So before we get into reflecting on our own performance, Katie, all right, I want to ask you both that question that Spencer W. Kimball asked, right? So here's what he asked. He says, what specifically did they do that was most helpful to you at a critical or important time in your life? So anyone, you can go first. All right. Katie or Mike.
Yeah. So
dive in.
So Katie, I don't know if you know this, but John had a thing that he did. There was a conference talk that came out. What lack I yet, I think, maybe. And the idea was that, are we living up to our potential, and what are we doing intentionally to address those things that we're lacking? And that really hit close to home for me. And I had heard about this thing that John did, and I went to John and said, hey, I'd like to spend some time with you. He would sit down with a person, and I think in the spirit of prayer and fasting, the person would be fasting, and John would have these cards.
Ah, you got the cards.
3x5 cards.
I have cards too, Mike.
You do. John would just say, okay, like almost picture 5 years from now, Mike, where do you want to be? And just start talking. And so you would say these things out loud, and he would just write down the card. And so you leave the session with these cards, and he would do a process with you. And I've got some things there but I keep these cards in my nightstand.
Wow.
And I read them, and I actually add some of my own thoughts. It's been 5 years probably since we did that exercise, but,
so Mike, what did that exercise mean to you?
John helped me see not who I am, but helped me see this, right? This blog and a podcast is a result of that exercise.
I'm going to do something that John Brandeburg would do right now, but I'm going to say it and do it. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. He'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, John helped me understand that if John was Mr. Drive versus Drift. Mike, you're not going to get to the places that you want to get by drifting there. You've got to be an active driver in your life.
He was all about intentional moves.
Yeah. John, like
hinge moments.
Katie, seriously. Hold on, Katie. We served together in a bishopric. He would be conducting. We would be together late that night, the night before he's conducting. He's like, yeah, I got to get home. I got to get up at 5 a.m. and prepare for conducting. I was like, John, church is at 9. And he's like, I got to get in the right mindset here, Mike. Right. And then he was a teacher. I'm a teacher. Right. And so I'm like Mr. Fly by the seat of my pants and kind of wing it. and he would be like, don't do that to me. I'm like, John, you're a teacher. You understand these things. He's like, no, everything.
Meticulous.
Scripted,
yeah.
Everything
prepared
down to the minute, because he was an early elementary teacher, and he understood that you can't wing it with 25, elementary kids.
No.
Oh man, he was a magnifier. John Brandeburg was a magnifier.
I love
All
that.
right. So let's put a pin in that, Mike. And Katie,
yeah,
it's your turn.
Okay. So,
right.
So when I think of 3 people who have influenced me in my life, they listened and they supported me no matter what I chose to do. Which sometimes was hard for them to watch.
Yeah.
And ended up being things that I had to move away from and make changes in my life. But they always listened, still listen, and they always support me.
So that to me, Katie, when you say that sounds like listening without judgment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
it's almost like letting the lesson happen, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they could have said to young Katie, hey, take it from me, that's not going to work out well.
Yep.
But they understand that young Katie's got to learn that lesson sometimes.
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, if we want to, get real here, both my parents went through divorces, right?
Yeah.
My dad was married, had 2 children actually. So I actually have a half sister who passed away when she was 8 years old. And her passing away opened him up to have so he was already married to my mom at that point, and opened him up to the idea of having another child. So as much as I am sad that I don't have my sister in my life, I feel a connection with her because I know that her passing allowed me to be her.
Wow.
But so he went through a divorce, right? And my mom went through a divorce. And of course, when you have children, you don't want them to go through the same things you do, right?
Right.
And I went through a divorce. And, back to that idea of the people who have influenced me, obviously my parents have been some of those people who have influenced me, and them having to watch me enter into a marriage with an abusive person was really hard for them. And they listened, they supported, even though they knew deep down inside it wasn't a good choice and it wasn't what they would want for me. They listened and they supported.
So what does it look like? They listen to you, they support you when they probably know, hey, this isn't going to be the best thing, right? You said I had to move away from that thing, and now you sit back in front of them after going through that. What is listening like? What does that look like now with them sitting there listening to you after you've gone through that?
So after going through it, the first thing they did was when I finally let them know what was going on, I was at my lowest, and it was a bad situation. I was only married for 8-9 months before a separation happened. And I moved back so my parents were in Reading, where Mike lives, at this point. And I believe he was in the bishopric with you, right? Okay. So at that point, they actually had kind of separated themselves from me. And what's interesting, and that is a very important part of my story, is, and I think of Christ. I think of Christ in Gethsemane when God leaves him, and he's still there. He's still there, but he's not actively speaking to Christ through the Spirit and whatnot. And so what had happened is my mom kind of got to a point where she's like, I can't be this, what you need me to be. Because the person I was married to was abusive towards them as well.
Yeah.
And so, what abusive people do is they drive wedges between you and the people that you love, right? The people who really do care about you, and make them look like the bad people, right? And so that's what had happened. And so there's this wedge that had been built, and at some point you have to create a boundary for yourself. And that's what my mom and my dad did. They created a boundary, and it put me in a position that allowed me to feel so alone that it pushed me to finally speak the truth. I'm being abused. This is not okay. And I need to get out. And I remember it was a Monday, and I called them on my way to work. I was teaching at a preschool in LA, and I called them, and what they did specifically in that moment was not just listen and support, but they dropped everything and drove all the way from Redding down to LA and literally picked me up and took me to a hotel from work. And they were willing to drop everything. Now, I mean, when it comes to being a parent, there is this level of, you have to allow your children to go through the process.
Sure.
Again, the process, we have to go through the journey. We can't just pick up all the pieces for them and do it for them. Right. Yeah. And so, ended up leaving and coming back home, a couple days later, to allow me to really fully make the decision on my own to leave and start the process of separating and getting a divorce. And that was not easy for them either. But my dad, being the person he was able, of course, my mom is she's the more protective one. Not that my dad isn't protective, but he was definitely more willing to let me figure it out.
Right.
To get my feelers out there. He was all about, just like what you said, very strategic, planned, you have to make this decision for yourself. It's not something that we can do for you. And so that allowed, he, as the partner of my mom, allowed her to feel the comfort that it was all going to be okay, But
I could say this, just kind of being outside looking at that process.
Sure.
He carried that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So he's not necessarily with you. He's giving you the space, but similar to that example with the Savior, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't ever stop thinking about it.
No.
Stop praying for you to be guided to make the decision that you needed to make. And when it was time, you're right. Drop everything. Mm-hmm. I can't, Bishop. I got to go.
Yeah. Right? And that, first of all, thank you for letting him do that. I don't know when all that happened, but it put me in the position that I went from this feeling of complete abandonment to complete support. And it gave me the courage to then move forward with the decision. And it put me in a space to be able to do that.
With Tyler's, we talk about this sometimes as parents, how often we are tempted and sometimes make the mistake of jumping in and shielding our kid from the very lesson.
Right.
Right. From the very thing that will teach them, we take it and the teaching moment is gone.
Right.
Well, and the moments happen from day one, right? Those moments start when you literally give birth to a child. Yeah. I'm the only one here who has experienced that, but
that's true, Katie. That's true.
But I would like to say that, once your child comes into this world, you become a father, and you're equally yoked in those roles, but you literally from day one begin that. And I'm an early childhood educator, right? Specifically in Montessori. And Montessori is all about choice. It's all about giving freedoms and limits. It goes hand in hand with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I have this great passion for Montessori. And so when I'm parenting, and specifically when my dad was parenting, he didn't know it, but he was very Montessori in his parenting style, because he would give me the lesson and then he'd give me the space and step back and observe. And that's what Montessori teachers are guides in the classroom.
I gotta imagine
that's what we do.
Yeah. And I gotta imagine, Katie, that, you know, going back to that experience of being in that relationship and getting to that moment where you make the decision that you're going to leave, and your parents come and they help out. I got to believe that process of understanding their ability to listen and not judge and to assist and to let you figure things out has sort of been this process that's been taking place throughout your whole life.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
So it's not like all of a sudden this is how it went down.
Yeah.
It's like, this is who John Brandeburg is. This is who your mom is. And so you understand that they're going to let you kind of experience those things. Right. And figure that out. I think that there's, you know, I appreciate you sharing that story, for one, because I know that's you know, that's not an easy thing to talk about, but I think it's important to understand that idea of reflecting on the people that influence us, right? That are there to kind of pick us up when we fall, or at least be there to watch us fall and then say, are you okay? Right. Because that's sort of the job as a parent. Right now it's like, I feel like that's my job. Like I remember, I remember a moment when my son was like, I don't know, like 3, right? And we have this swing set in my backyard, and we look outside, and there's my son and his cousin in their underwear on the top crossbar of the swing set.
And you just
like
know.
my wife and
this
I,
is not going to end well. And I need to get a video camera. I need to get a video camera so I can win $10,000.
Right? We're like, what? My wife's like, I've got to get out there and
America's home videos.
Right? And you're just like, hold on. Let's let them figure some things out here, right? We'll intervene when we have to, but we've got to let them get to the point where they understand that this is perilous, right? Yeah. And I think that that's the process, you know, that you just explained, is that, you know, hey, look, he could have stepped in and said, look, this guy's a bad dude. You're not, you know, we can't let you do this. But at the end of the day, it's, hey, this is something that you're going to have to experience on your own. Yeah. And I imagine that there's things that you take away from that. I mean, oh yeah. Right. What's the application now for you in those lessons from your parents teaching you those same things?
Oh, I mean, first of all, with that situation, I am now happily married and I have a family and everything's good.
Yes. So we should have mentioned
your
that.
Listeners, everything is happy. And I have a wonderful husband who works so hard, and we have 2 beautiful children. And so, you know,
you're blessed.
I'm blessed. Yeah. Very blessed. And I believe I'm blessed because I went through that experience. Amen. I don't think I would be where I am without that experience.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, is this idea that my dad didn't like to dwell on past stuff. He was a very forward motion person, you know? And sometimes that really bugged me as a teenager and as a daughter. You know, I'd maybe come to him with my woes and boy problems and stuff, but I could go to him about stuff like that. That's the great thing about my dad. Goes back to that being present thing, right? Yeah. And he would go, okay, so now what? You know, like, and that was often his advice. It was kind of just like point blank, like, okay, you went through this thing. Now what? And sometimes that just really bothered me because I wanted him to just wallow in it with me. And I tend to be this emotional, sensitive empath type personality. And it's not that he didn't have empathy for me in those situations, but or anybody. He was just okay, let's move forward. Let's figure out how to do it. Let's get you there, you know? And that was one of his greatest gifts for all people, not just me, not just my mom, as you know, in their marriage, but I mean, for you, Mike, for, you know, people that he hardly even knew. He would be like, so tell me about yourself. And then he'd be like, okay, now what? What are you going to do with it? You know? And so, yeah, I mean.
But I think that's the key to hope, right? So,
totally.
So Katie, my heart is happy that you're in a great place. But if I'm looking back on the movie, there was a place where you weren't in a great place.
Yeah, no.
How did you find hope in that place?
So it took a long time. I mean, my husband, Daniel, he also went through a divorce. So we have that in common. And we call the residual stuff landmines. That sometimes you have these little landmines that you step on, and or your partner steps on. Some people might call it trauma, you know. Sure. You know, these landmines that happen, and you have to, you know, look at those moments and go, okay, you know, this is something that's coming up, you know. And so I'm still kind of working through some of those things that happen. And I'm a huge advocate of therapy. Huge advocate. I want to get rid of the stigma, especially in the church. It's something that has helped shape me. It's given me tools to be a better me. It's never been a place of shame for me. And the reason why is because I deal with, or I like to say I navigate through depression and anxiety. But my dad did as well, actually. And, you know, watching him go through his depressive episode when I was, 12, 13 years old, which was a very dark time for him, helped me know that when I was going through my dark times, that through the help of professionals and the help of people who actually knew how to go into this space in my head and go, okay, let's figure this out. Let's move forward. Let's give you the tools that you need. So knowing that my father could do it, I knew that I could do it. Right.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Tyler, you've maybe heard me tell this story, but I remember one day, super happy, optimistic, enthusiastic Mike Freeman was up there doing a song and dance and teaching young people about the gospel of Jesus Christ and about Heavenly Father's plan for happiness. And as you know, Mosiah 2:41, blessed are all those that keep the commandments, and you're going to be happy and it's all going to work out, right? If you follow the script and run the program, you will be happy. And John Brandeburg pulled me aside and just said, hey, Bishop, just so you know, sometimes you can run the program and sometimes you can do everything right and there's no color in your life.
Yep.
He said that, and it was like scales coming off my eyes, right?
Yeah.
I had never before considered that.
Yeah.
That sometimes you're in a hole and sometimes you're in a place where there's not light at the end of this thing. There aren't rainbows and unicorns, even close. It's gray, and it's a grind, and it's one step in front of another, right? But it's forward.
Right.
And that's a huge lesson. And I don't talk like that anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I still believe that there's a plan of happiness. I do believe that as I'm striving to do the commandments, I know that wickedness never was happiness. That's the lesson. It's not necessarily that as I strive to be obedient, I'm guaranteed a happy, joy kind of life.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's sort of a dangerous thought, right? Because it discounts a lot of people's realities that they live in. And right. And I think that, I love that you taught that lesson, and you and I have had that conversation many times, because I know a lot of people that struggle with depression or anxiety or both, or a combination of other, mental, imbalances, and, that there's by no fault of their own. Right. And they're looking for the light, and that's a hard place to be, right? When the light just isn't there.
Well, and the challenge for the way I was teaching was I'm putting it on the person.
For sure.
Right. The person, I'm now saying, you're in this spot. And if they're listening to that teaching, they're hearing, oh, it's something I'm not doing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And that's not it. And if anything, I think, Katie, you've touched on a couple of things that we struggle with in life and in the church. We've had conversations with other guests on the podcast with who have gone through and experienced divorce.
Yeah.
Right. And divorce is, it's another landmine kind of a situation where you could sit in it and say, oh, I failed. Right. Or
and
other people.
Certainly culturally, it could be projected onto you. Failed, right?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Right. Yeah. That's the big problem.
I totally
cultural
agree,
part of it.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving back to Utah was one of the, so I went to school at BYU and worked as a young professional in Salt Lake, and then moved to LA, got married, and then came back like a year later. I failed. And I mean, I moved home for a little while, about a month, but like we were talking about, it was that, that ebb and flow of, okay, we've supported you, now you need to go, kind of a thing. Right. We can't pay for your food anymore, Katie.
we fixed your broken wing. It's time to try this.
Exactly. Exactly. No, it's true. And I was, kind of like, do I move back to Utah? And really that I know about the little hinge moments, that you talk about. And really that was that may have not been a little hinge moment. It was a pretty big hinge moment in my life, because I made this decision. And the minute I moved back, I moved into the ward that my husband was in. And so, of course there's that, but just that feeling of, why would I go back and face people who see me as a failure, who see me as, and of course, like, nobody did,
Sure.
Maybe some of them did,
Sure.
But, like when it comes down to it, like it's more in your head than anything. And just the feeling of the church is so based on family. Family. When you have a family, you succeed. You have succeeded. When you are exalted, it is because of your family, because you are sealed. Now, I wasn't sealed to my first husband. And so luckily I didn't have that kind of messy of a situation. But I was still, in that place of, I failed this. I wanted this so bad, and everyone wants it so bad and wants to do it right. That's been a big thing for me in therapy, is the idea of doing it right, quote unquote,
What
that
does
they're
that
really,
even look
yeah,
like?
like what does that even
Yeah.
look like? And especially in the church,
Yeah.
like we have this idea of, oh, you have to be this type of, mother, or this
Yeah.
type of father, or this type of priesthood holder, or Relief Society member, or minister, or whatever, follow these rules exactly to a T, exactly how they are written out. And sometimes it's just not about that, and
When I think that when I
Most of the
throw
time,
this
it's not
out there,
about that.
yeah,
though,
exactly.
Right? I mean,
when I
that's
throw
the
this out there,
reality.
what does that even look like? I do want to make sure that we understand. I think this program, this purpose of us getting together is trying to get it right. There is a right.
Yeah, sure.
I think that we're just obsessed with this the right way to do it is projected, like Tyler said.
I think
right?
the words, it's how you say it. Get it
Yeah.
right is different than the right way. You know what I mean?
I think so too. There's not one way to get there, right? So it's just as long as we're getting there.
Sure.
Right? You said get it right. I think as long as we get there, that's the goal. How we do it and what paths. And you mentioned earlier that this was an experience I had to go through, right? And so think about that, right? We talk about getting it right. I think getting it right has that experience right in the middle of it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
yes.
we can't say, well, if Katie didn't have that experience, she would have done it right.
Oh yeah.
No,
and
that is right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think of my dad and his life. He was this kind of otherworldly dude, and people saw him as this great man. And when he passed away, a little bit of us were like, but they didn't really know him. Like, they didn't really know that he wasn't always the best guy. Like right. He was flawed. He was a flawed man. He didn't always get it right.
Yeah.
He had this Irish temperament about him. And I have it too. So I have to be really careful. My poor husband. But like, it got the best of him. And my mom, I was pretty young. And my mom she was resolved. She was like, nope, we will have, my dad wasn't a member at this time. He joined the church when I was almost 3, I think it was 3 or 4. And he was a man of lots of ideas. There's truth in all things, which is true. I love that. And I have taken that with me, but he never really had a specific faith or an idea of what faith was until this moment, where my mom was like, nope, this is where we're going, which I thought was just so awesome. There's so many women out there.
We've heard that story.
Go, nope.
You're not the first one to say that.
Yeah.
We're going this way and you're either coming or you're not, kind of a thing. Right. Yeah. And she did that, and she wanted to have the gospel back in her life and started going back to church. And he was like, okay. And he kind of went, okay, I'm going to, she looked at him and said, you're a better man than this. And she remembers his face being just like, yep, you're right. Because he knew that he was saved. He knew that he was preserved and watched over. He knew that about himself. And he knew that he was meant for something, and the gospel really was that for him. And so what's interesting is that, he went through the process of the missionary discussions, right? Back then they were the discussions, and he went through 9 sets of missionaries.
Wow.
9 sets. That's a lot of sets.
That is a lot of sets.
Those of you who don't know. And finally he got the APs. Like that, they needed the
bring in the big guns.
The big guns, the assistants to the president of the mission. And they finally, this was kind of his hinge moment, was that he would fall asleep during the lessons.
That's awesome.
Just full on snoring. And I called them the guys. I'm like, the guys are here, and I'd sit in and enjoy the lesson, and he'd fall asleep. And then they finally just went, okay, John Brandeburg, what would you do if you were us? And that question was like exactly what he does with everybody, right? With the cards, with the process that he does and helping people. So he did the whole thing with them, and then he ended up being baptized because of it.
Yeah.
So, that was back when, the numbers of baptisms were kind of a big deal and stuff. And, the church doesn't really focus on that anymore, which is good. I think we're more about bringing people to Christ than just about the number of baptisms. But, he had this moment where, he had 3 days of feeling the Spirit. It was just like there. It was just like all encompassing. And he knew that it was true. And that's when he chose to be baptized. And, we ended up being sealed in the temple as a family. And that is actually one of my very first memories that I remember, is that experience. Just the memory of being in that sacred, holy place with my family. And yeah, he just had this moment in his life where my mom was like, we're not doing this. And so he was willing. I think the fact that he had this willingness to progress and become better, it was a constant thing for him. And for me, that's what I focus on with whatever I go through, whether it's my divorce, whether it's a hard pregnancy, whether it's, deciding to leave my job my career that I love dearly and be a stay-at-home mom. I look at those moments and I go, okay, this is going to help me become better, rather than looking at it as, this is hard and I don't want to do it. What is it going to give me in my life? How is it going to make me a better person? And so, back to my situation, I needed to go through that. It was part of it. It was part of the fabric of the journey,
Yeah.
What is your experience in having gone through the experiences you've done, you've just shared with us? How does that change the way you care for and treat people going through similar situations?
I tend to be, and my father actually was the one who helped me see this about myself. I tend to be a step back, bigger picture person. I'm able to step back and look at somebody's life or, somebody's decision or what somebody's going through and kind of go, okay, and I can do it with myself for the most part, but I just have this way of being able to step back and see, maybe what's going on in somebody's life, and a little bit of, I don't think I'm like a straight up empath, but I tend to take on people's emotions and what they're going through and really feel them deeply, which I'm grateful for. Sometimes it's hard and I have to create boundaries with that. But I think I see depression and anxiety as a landscape that we all move through. And what's interesting is this idea of a rich life, right? This is what your whole podcast is about. The richest man in town. The idea of what a joyful life is versus what a rich life is. And I found through, going to therapy, through going through my life and the things that I've gone through, that I'd rather have a rich life because it encompasses all of the emotions, all of the things, all of the feelings, all of the icky, all of the good, all of the nitty and gritty stuff. That's what makes a landscape beautiful. Whatever landscape you're in, you're driving through the desert of Utah, the southern desert of Utah.
It's pretty ugly. Yeah.
It's this red rock, this.
I'm just kidding. You're going.
St. George, we apologize for that.
It's not brought to you. This episode not brought to you by the St. George Chamber of Commerce.
Just the different landscapes that we have in our life and that we can go through, right?
Yeah.
One isn't bad and one isn't good. They all are meant to be within the landscape and the fabric of your journey, right? And so when somebody else is going through those things, I have a deep sense of empathy and I guess just this feeling that I know what they're going through. Obviously it's different, but that I feel it with them, that I can go along the journey with them, right? Whoever they are, even if it's somebody I don't really know that well, if they for some reason feel like they can open up to me, then I'm there to listen and to support.
Yeah,
right?
I think of that word myopic. That keeps coming up, right?
Yeah.
Like when we're going through this thing without that perspective, without that big picture perspective, we are in it and it's all we see.
Yep. And we're drowning in it, right?
And we're drowning
in it. Yeah.
And if you back up and look at, I love that word landscape too. If you looked at it as an entire landscape, as like, this is a season in your life. I do think it is important from time to time to ask ourselves if we are hurting ourselves, if we are making choices that are contrary to that way of happiness, right? Asking that question, where will that lead?
Absolutely.
Because I think that you've got one life, right? This life is more than just a read through, right? We're going to, in fact, I had to defend Red Hot Chili Peppers in my home the other day.
What?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Abe's like, oh, I love Red Hot Chili Peppers. And Dad, would you go to Red Hot Chili Peppers concert? I'm like, absolutely. And Kelly was like, what?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm going to agree with her. What?
Wow. I've already been.
All right. Sorry, I digress. But this life is more than just a read through, right? We've got to get it right. And there are some things that can damage us if we don't check it and make course corrections and change. But the overall landscape is a beautiful, rich thing when seen from that 30,000 viewpoint.
Yeah, I would rather have a rich life than just a happy one. Why would I always want to be happy and like joyful constantly? Like that's not.
We have to know the bitter to know the sweet, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're describing, Katie, reminds me of a quote from Gordon B. Hinckley. And he says, anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he's been robbed. Most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up to be just people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. Life is like an old-time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts. Interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride.
Whew, I feel like that's something my dad would say too. Really, honestly.
But I feel like that's what you're describing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
true. we go through these hard things so that we can understand that, there is a beautiful vista out there. And that part of the road was bumpy and it was tough. And I don't want to go over that part of the road again. But boy, we sure learned something going over that part of the road.
Yeah.
And we find value as we help others.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As we've gone through it and we turn and help other fellow travelers, right? And we're like, hey, you might want to look out for that spot.
Yeah.
Hey, I wouldn't necessarily go there, right?
Well, let me ask you this question real quick, Katie, because I think I want to go back to a point you made earlier. You talked about being a believer in therapy. And you said, I'd love to delete the stigma that's attached to that so people can find the power in therapy. I agree with you 100%. We've had a couple.
I think every person needs a therapist.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
And we've had a couple guests that talked about very candidly about some of their experiences in therapy and how it saved them.
Sure.
But what would you say to someone that was wrestling with that idea of, should I go? Are people going to judge me differently because I go? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had these conversations before with a couple close friends, and I always let them know I'm here for you. First of all, I'm here for you whether you go or not.
Yeah.
I just know what I've gained from it is these tools. I have this little tool belt, right? That I can just go, oh, I'm feeling anxious today. I'm going to do some meditation. Or I need to go write in my journal. I need to do a gratitude practice. I need to look outside and find 5 things that are the color green to bring me back into the present. All these things that I've gained from somebody who's completely unbiased, right?
Yeah.
In my life, I can say anything to them, and they're not gonna judge me, and so as much as I can be that support to a friend, I can't do what a professional can do, right? And so I always let my friends know when, because I'm not quiet about it. My friends know. People who know me
good. Yeah.
know that I'm in. I mean, my 4-year-old, I'm just going to say this. My 4-year-old knows, oh, mom's going to therapy. She doesn't know exactly what's going on,
Nice.
but I've told her, I go and I talk about how I'm feeling and what my brain is telling me and how I'm feeling.
Talk about what you're doing to me.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Hey, sometimes I talk about her.
Right.
And the thing is we really are trying to create a home where that's not a stigma. So if she needs to have that when she's older, she won't feel ashamed, and I don't know what that's going to look like for her as she grows up, but yeah, I always want people in my life to know that there's nothing wrong with you when you choose to go to therapy. It's just like going to the doctor. We go once a year to get our blood drawn, to make sure, our heart's working, it's for our brain, it's a checkup on your brain. And sometimes you have to go check up on your brain every other week. And sometimes you go check up on your brain once a year.
Yeah.
I think that the times that we live in are demanding times, and we are complex individuals.
Oh, absolutely.
With stresses and inputs and pressures.
It's coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
From everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
All directions.
And I would say too, I mean, we've had this conversation in my house, my youngest suffers from anxiety, and we have her talk to a therapist, and it's just arming yourself. And the interesting thing is with tools, right? And the interesting thing is my young 11-year-old has said, when we first brought this up, was like, are people going to think I'm, it was interesting, that reaction at that age. And we said exactly what you said. You go to the doctor for a lot of things, right? We just want to be as healthy as we can be. And we want to have the people that know the right things to say and give us the right tools. That's who we want to talk to. So I think it's important. I love that message that you talk about, because I think it's important that that people, Elder Holland gave that great talk, right? A broken vessel.
Oh,
and one of the things he talks about in that is that, we want to seek the Lord. We want to seek the atonement, but we seek all the tools that we have at our disposal, right?
Absolutely.
We don't delete things because it doesn't have the title of the church on it, right? We use all the tools that are at our disposal. And I think that's a huge point. So I applaud you for that conversation with your friends. I think it's one we should all have.
Katie,
well,
can we revisit that idea of landmines? I'm curious to know how you treat a landmine, right? How you identify it. How do you work around that?
And how do you repair it after you step on them? Because it's probably where I'm coming from.
Hey, it happens. It happens, and it's possible to repair it.
Okay, good.
So like I said before, my husband and I both went through divorces, so we both had that in common, right? And sometimes the landmine has to do with each other, And sometimes it's just a personal landmine that I step on and not realize. And what's interesting is sometimes you have to step on it in order to realize there's an issue, right? That there's some trauma there that you need to work out, right? And sometimes you already know them and you go, oh, hey, just so you know. I think a big thing is communication, especially with me and Daniel. We have really good communication. That was a very, very, very important thing for both of us. Coming in, doing second time around, we were like,
I've often said that there's nothing more powerful than a non-example.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when you live that non-example of what bad communication can do, you're super sensitive to make sure that, hey,
it's true.
I'm going to make sure I communicate.
Yeah. And we had very specific things that were very individual, kind of the 3 top things we needed if we were going to ever get married again. And we had this was like completely separate, right? And we became really good friends. So I guess I should just like tell my story really quick.
How did you meet Daniel?
Yeah, let's go there first.
So literally, I moved back to Utah. I was still in the middle of the divorce. So it took about 10 months to go through the divorce, and we didn't have kids. So that was icky. It wasn't fun. But I'm glad we didn't have even more of a problem with having kids involved. Kids are wonderful. I'm not saying, don't have kids. I'm saying have children, just with the right person.
Get it right.
Get it right. So yeah, it took about 10 months, and I met Daniel the very first Sunday. So I moved in to the basement with my best friend. She was like, come live with me in this basement, in this hole. You gotta love
best
dog,
friends, right?
And you can live for free for a little while until you find a job. Like, she was, again, one of those people that she supported me. She was there for me, didn't judge me. Maybe she judged me a little bit. That's okay. and I moved in, and he was the elders quorum president in that ward. And so I remember the very first Sunday, I walk straight up to the bishop, and I'm like bawling. Okay. You go from like, I was just messed up, right? It was just a messed up situation. And I walk up to him, and I just didn't trust men at that point, other than my dad. It was just like, I didn't know who to trust. Right. And so I'm feeling these nerves to even talk to a bishop. And instead of like holding back and talking to him, like in a room by, with just him and telling all my I just start like unloading. I'm going through a divorce. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be in this ward, and he was really awesome. He actually was a lot like my dad too. He was very like, okay, what now? Let's move forward, kind of a thing. Great Bishop Price. And he's like, well, this is President Sellers. This is our eldest quorum president. And Daniel was like, hello. And, it's just this kind of really smiley, nice looking guy with a bow tie. And, I was like coming off of this divorce from this not awesome situation, and so I kind of thought he was this kind of goody two shoes type guy. And he thought I was the crazy lady going through a divorce, which I was. So he was kind of not instructed, but he was like told by the bishop, like, you need to keep an eye on this one, And so Daniel put himself over him and his companion, ministering or home teaching companion over me as home teachers. And he came and visited me with his companion, and I just cried the entire time. I can't believe he even like saw me as a potential somebody to marry or date or anything, because I would just, every time he saw me, I just cried and cried. yeah, he kind of became my confidant because he went through the same situation, right? And we just became really good friends. And that first visit, he realized, oh, there's something more to this girl, like she's not just the crazy divorced person that's going through, crazy thing right now. And so yeah, we became really good friends, and of course we remained friends while I was going through my divorce. So this was in July, and by November, I had moved out of the ward, and we just stayed friends and would do, group activities, and I had decided to go to therapy. I hit a low point during my divorce where I realized, okay, I've got to do this a different way. I got to focus on me and not, go out there and try to fill the hole, right? One of the reasons why therapy was really important for me was to learn, my relationship with men, and to not bring that into my next marriage or relationship, right? And so I decided, okay, I'm not even going to entertain the idea of dating or anything during my divorce, and Daniel just became my confidant. He became my friend. We talked. I felt like I could talk about anything with him, and him to me as well. And I got this wild idea. So I actually am a musician as well. My dad was an amazing fingerstyle blues guitarist, and so my whole life I was up on the stage. Yeah, a picker. I'm a picker. That's what he used to say. I'm a picker. Actually, there's a great story about a kid who my dad was like playing music in a store, in a music store, because that's what musicians do. They go to the music store and they get a guitar out and they sit their hand up and they start their knee up and they put the guitar on their knee. At least that's what my dad would do. And this kid comes in. He wrote this on my dad's Facebook after my dad passed away, and it was the best story that we got. And my dad's just playing away, just ragtime country blues, and he stops and he looks up and the kid's just like, what was that? And my dad goes, yep, I'm a picker.
That's awesome.
So that's the kind of dude he was, right?
That's awesome.
And
he would always be inviting us to the gigs too. So so my wife and I would drop into a wine bar, right? A couple of Mormon people hanging out in a wine bar, and it's like, can I get you anything? It's like, no, we're just here for the town.
Well, get this. I was a 2-3-year-old up on a stage in a bar singing with him. So, there's that too.
Rad.
So from the time I was small, I sang alongside my dad. So it wasn't until I went to college that I realized, okay, I really do want to play the guitar. I did everything from opera to musical theater, and landed in singer-songwriter kind of territory, and picked up the guitar and went with it. And so, during my divorce, I was in this place of, reawakening with my music and realizing, I love this and I want to do this. And so Daniel would put on these open mic nights, right, at the church. And I asked him, hey, can I come play sometime? And if he was here, he would have his perspective of the whole thing, right? Like, oh yeah, you could come, like that would be great. Like thinking, like having no idea, that I had performed and played. I feel like I'm tooting my own horn right now, but I did the whole cool hip singer-songwriter thing in college, and so I had a couple songs up my sleeve and couple licks and things like my dad did, and so I came and played, and afterwards I think his friend turned to him and was like, if you don't marry her, I'm going to. So it kind of like turned into this thing, right, where like we started playing music together, and then I got this wild idea. I was like, I want to build a bed. And he's like, okay. And I knew that he had studied industrial design in college. Now he's a web developer. But I was like, hey, you know how to do that kind of stuff. Like, can you help me design a bed? Because I have a mattress, but I need a bed. He's like, sure. So we spent like a month and a half building a bed. I'm going through a divorce. We're not even dating, and we're building a bed together. Like, so funny. So even his family made fun of him, at Christmas time, after he, told them, there's this girl, and I built a bed with her. And they're like, you built a bed with her, you gonna lie in it too?
That's not your typical how I met your mother story.
I know, right?
That's a good one though.
We still have the bed. So yeah, we just became those weekends. We would get together and he taught me how to use a saw, and we'd go to Home Depot, and I like to say we fell in love in Home Depot. And of course, we kept our distance from each other until I was properly divorced. But yeah, there were a couple. By that time, he was like, yeah, I'm not going to go on dates with anybody else. And I finally, he's a Southern gentleman. He's from Texas. He's a Cajun. And he's like, never said a word to me. And I finally just like pulled it out of him. Like, what is going on here? You like to spend all this time with me, like we hang out, like what's going on here? And he's like, well, I'd really like to take you on a date when the time is right. Pause. I'd like to take you on the first date, because he knew there was kind of a line of dudes that apparently wanted to take me out. And so,
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, he was the first date. First kiss, first I love you, all on the same day when I was divorced.
Wow.
Literally the day I was divorced. We're like, so that was 10 months of, being friends and really getting to know each other. We could talk. And like, I think that's my greatest piece of advice to anybody who's single out there. Talk, like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you want to be physically attracted. You want to have that, but you want to be able to talk, because there's times in life where you can't have that. And you want to be able to go through life's ups and downs. So that's kind of the shortened version of our story. But yeah, as far as landmines go, with him and I, because we have that solid communication, we're able to, when we start to feel it, I usually can feel it in the sense of feeling anxiety or feeling frustrated or getting emotional. I can't think of any like specific ones right now, but like if there's something, well, I can think of one. It's actually his. So when we were very first married, we got in a fight, and it wasn't even like that big of a fight. We rarely fight, which is great too. Again, because of the communication, right? And I got mad about something, and in my first marriage, because of the level of abuse that I was going through, I would try, the fight or flight thing, and I would try to fly away. But this person, he wouldn't let me leave. He would trap me in my house. And so for me, when I get upset, I need time to cool off, right? And so when I felt, and of course, Daniel is nowhere near who this other person was,
Right.
the behavior of that person, the abusive nature. But, when you get in a fight, it's like, okay, I just want out of here. And so I left. And for Daniel, that was like, I had done something so terrible and so awful to leave. And we realized that we needed to come together and go, okay, what works for us? How, when you're feeling this way, and I don't want to step on that landmine, because we don't want to risk putting our marriage in a place that could start to crack, right? We want to build our marriage and create a really solid foundation. And so instead of me running away or leaving the house, that I could maybe go into another room and that simple change, really changed how we handled those moments in our marriage. That was actually, I think, the first landmine that we hit on at the beginning of our marriage. And so it kind of like set the precedent of how we handled other situations like that. So yeah, I think when it comes down to it, it's being willing to talk about it, to be vulnerable enough to go, hey, I think this is going on in me. Another point, was when we hit the landmarks of our previous marriages. So like for him, it was the 3-year mark and the 5-year mark were the bad times, right? And I could sense him kind of self-sabotaging in a way. And that sort of is a landmine in a way, where you start to feel, I could feel him kind of self-sabotaging, seeing the relationship, our marriage going downhill, or maybe us parting, even though maybe that was in the back of his head and not really at the forefront. Just like in some of his behavior and like feel, and the same thing goes for me. Like there were moments where leading up to, year mark, I was like, like how is this going to work? Like, are we going to get past this? And so the idea of kind of self-sabotaging and for me to feel vulnerable enough to go, hey, I think this might be happening with us or with you, how do you feel about that? Like, does that ring true? And he immediately was like, yes, that totally rings true. That totally makes sense. And for him to be vulnerable enough to admit that, I think is a huge part when it comes to those moments where you hit a weak spot or a landmine that could potentially become a big thing, to be able to diffuse it and to go, okay, this is how we're going to restructure this. And that way we can move forward and again, have the tools in our marriage.
Well, and so often in relationships, like just a general rule that I wish I lived by, I probably need to remind myself more, but when something doesn't make sense, that's when it's important to have that communication. It's important to have the talk so that you can gather the information, because if it's not making sense, there's something you don't understand, right? It's not that the other person is being irrational. Something is going on.
Yeah.
And you need to gather some information so that you can know what's
and he does
on.
that with me too. Like there are moments where, especially during a pandemic, literally I had a baby in January, pandemic started. The week we put our house up for sale was the week that COVID hit Utah and that earthquake happened in Utah, which our house felt the effects of it. We felt the aftershocks, and of course, California. I'm from California, but Daniel's from Texas. So he had a harder time with the earthquakes.
Dramatic. Yeah.
Put your house for sale. We lived in a 90-plus-year-old house, and so we were nervous about getting it sold, to end up, and then moving into this new house. And then I actually had some health issues. I had to get my gallbladder out this summer and was dealing with that. Just like thing on top of thing, like it was just compounding. And to be able to kind of step back and go, okay, this is a lot. And he was able to go, okay, I'm here for you. This is a lot going on in our lives. And if there was a moment, there were many moments where I was just not in my best, the Irish temperament, like there's those moments, right? And he's going, okay, what's going on here? And being willing to sit down and go, okay, we need to work through this.
Hey, can I talk to you a little bit about landmarks? In our call before the show, you shared out that you're coming up on a landmark this week.
Oh yeah.
And I don't want to trigger a landmine here, so you can tell
No,
me to
no,
stop.
it won't at all.
Yeah. So 2 years ago this week.
Yeah, 2 years ago this week, my dad was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and it was pretty hard. Excuse me if I cry.
That's okay.
I remember I remember getting the call, and then my dad was like, he's like, okay, I have some news for you. And his voice was really shaky. And he's like, do you have a minute? And I was literally on my way to watch my sweet daughter do her Halloween parade at school. And my husband was at work, and he went, yeah, so I have been diagnosed with kidney cancer, and I just really don't remember the whole conversation. I just remember the C word, the big C word, and just feeling immediate panic. I was very calm with him on the phone, but I could sense his panic, and that was really hard. It's really hard to hear your dad, who's like your champion, sound scared. And he was like, we're gonna fight this. I have hope. And then I said, well, do you want to come watch your cute 2-year-old daughter walk in her Minnie Mouse costume? And he said, yeah, sure do. And I got off the phone, and I immediately lost it and called Daniel and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed as I was driving, which is not very good, but I couldn't be late for my sweet daughter. And, I got there, and it was like, all of a sudden I saw him, and I knew it was going to be okay. And from that moment on, I felt complete peace. And it's so weird because, after losing him to it, I go, that first week was like, go, 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 funeral, all of that. It wasn't until, I would say about a couple weeks after he passed, it started really hitting that it was like, well, why did I feel that peace? Why? And I'm at this point now that I know that it's because it all went smoothly. There was no hard fighting he had to do, right? Yeah, the end was hard, that last month was rough for him. But I knew that because it gave me the ability to be his champion then during the whole process after, or during the hospice. It was literally, we found out in October. He had surgery to remove a kidney in November. And then by mid-January, he started going downhill pretty fast. And then the week of Valentine's Day, 2019. So Valentine's Day was on a Thursday. And let's see, I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday night, he got the call that it had spread to his abdomen. And that basically, like, there's no reason to do any more at this point, because his body was shutting down. And so he went on hospice, and that week is probably the most sacred week of my life. To be able to mother in a new way, to step back as, yes, I'm his daughter, but to be able to mother him alongside my mother was incredible. I think of Mary, you know, the Marys and Christ. Not that my dad is like Christ, but you know, like I can relate to those women and how they may have mothered Christ during that time, you know, and maybe that's not in the scriptures specifically, but there are little stories here and there in the scriptures that talk about women, you know, anointing him and you know, that he showed up to a woman first after he was resurrected, you know? So that experience of mothering my father was really sacred and special. And it was one of those moments in my life that I will never forget. And even though he's gone, he really lives on. It's funny when people say stuff like that, when they say, oh, you know, their spirit is still there and their legacy and all of that. Like, I just didn't get that for a long time until my dad passed away. And now I get it. I get it. He is still here. He's still present in my life. He's still present in my daughter's life. And he's still present in my mom's life. And it's these moments, these quiet moments that happen. Like, so my name obviously is Katie, and he would call me Katie did. That was my nickname. And the other night, just randomly on my porch, in front of my door, was a katydid. And I see this insect, and my dad loved insects. He loved nature. He loved like looking at birds. Oh, there's a red-tailed hawk, you know, pointing out plants. He was kind of this biologist and botanist deep down in his soul. And so I see this katydid, and I hadn't been, you know, thinking about my dad for a while. That's the weird thing with grief, is it's kind of ebbs and flows, you know, and it's different for everybody. And so I see this insect, and I'm like, oh, hi, Dad. I guess you're there. I guess I need to remember you. But yeah, it's really cool to have those experiences now.
Katie, how do you honor your dad today?
That's a great question. I honor him through being willing to grow continually, to focus on not only, you know, being a better person, but progressing and moving forward as a better person, to learn from my mistakes that I make, and to be willing to step back and go, okay, what now? So that's one way I honor him. Another way I honor him is through music. For many years after I did the singer-songwriter thing, I had immense anxiety about music. And there's a specific moment that happened actually in the few months before my dad passed, where I had decided in around like September. So he was diagnosed in October. So around September, I had this strong feeling that I needed to start doing guitar lessons with my dad. He was a guitar teacher as well as an amazing musician. And that was one of his greatest joys, was coaching students in fingerstyle guitar, to continue that legacy, because I don't think that style of music would continue without a person like my dad. And so I just had this really big feeling like I needed to do, I called it music time, because I was so anxious about music. It became this source of deep negativity for me, that I couldn't even call it like lessons or anything like that. I just called it music time with Dad, you know, like I had to make it this fun thing in order to do it. And those are, so we did it every week for the last little while of his life. It got to a point, I remember the last time we did it, he was just really run down. And he's like, yeah, can we not do it today? And we just sat and talked instead. And that was hard. That was really, really hard to see my dad becoming weaker, so much so that he couldn't play guitar anymore. Because that, I mean, as a teenager, as a young child, waking up on Saturday mornings to my dad blaring his guitar was really hard, but it was certainly one of my most favorite fond memories now, to walk into the house and hear his music, you know. So to see him visibly weakened and not be able to play, it was really hard. But there was this one day where I was fighting it, you know. I was like, I don't want to do this music time thing, but I just feel like I need to with my dad. And it wasn't always really about the music. I mean, when it comes down to it, it was more about talking. It was more about the camaraderie, the being able to be father and daughter and to discuss life's deep issues and deep things, you know. The things that stress my mom out that we could talk about when we were by ourselves. And I finally just opened up to him, and I told him about all my anxiety about music. And he listened. He had this ability, and he did it with my mom and me, where he would sit back. If he knew that you needed to talk, he would put the remote down, he'd turn off the TV, even if it was the big game, and he would turn in his chair and he would listen. And that's what he did that day. He just turned his chair and he sat back and he had his legs crossed and he listened. And I told him, you know, I feel this anxiety, and I told him my whole story and the reason why, and that I finally was starting to feel this release of it, but I just didn't know how to let go of it and how to change my perspective on music and how to get rid of that anxiety. And he listened for like an hour and a half without saying really a word. And that wasn't really like him. Sometimes he would interject. You know, he would listen, but he would go, okay, and do the, okay, well, what now? You know, or let's move forward. Okay, you've said that multiple times. Let's, you know, that was very much him, you know, like, okay, this is getting cyclical. Let's move on. But he didn't do that. He just listened, and he heard me, and I just unloaded on him. It was like word vomit. Just started. It was stuff I never shared with anybody, not even my husband. And just this deep shame, this deep anxiety of, well, if I pick up my guitar, then I have to play a song. And then if I play a song, I have to write a song. And then if I write a song, I have to record the song. I mean, you hear that. It's just this deep anxiety, right? And at the end of the conversation, or at the end of me just unloading on him, he looked at me and he went, Katie, you have a gift that I never had. And that's when I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you are a master at the guitar. Like, what are you talking about? You know? Anyway, okay, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you a little story. And he told me about how when he first started playing guitar as, you know, the 19-year-old, this is like 1960, right? He picked up the guitar and he heard this music, right? This country blues music, and he instantly fell in love. And he said, he was like, I would get up on stage and I would play the guitar and I wouldn't talk in between. You know, I didn't do the banter thing. I didn't have stage presence. And he's telling me all this. And I'm going, what? Like, that's not the John Brandeburg that I know. Like, I feel like I have this guy that I have the standard that I have to live up to as a Brandeburg, right? Like I have to be the showman. I have to, like do all the things, and tell all the stories and all of that. And I thought that was how he always was. And he's like, no, that never came naturally to me. And I was floored. I was like, no, that doesn't make sense to me. That's not who I know, and he said, but you have that gift. You have stage presence. You have the gift to, and all of a sudden he went from, listening to completely booing me up. And it wasn't just in a way that was like, oh no, you're great, Katie, you got this. It wasn't ever from a place of, cliche, it wasn't feigned. Generic. He never feigned it. It was always completely genuine. Like, no, you have a gift I never had. And him saying that changed the trajectory for me completely, because he opened up himself to go, no, I'm not this perfect guy that everyone thinks I was when it comes to music, or I'm not, like I had my struggles when it came to getting up on stage, not necessarily, fear, but
right.
But he struggled with that, the stage presence things, right?
Yeah.
Which he got better at, obviously. We watched him on stage and everyone just loved watching him. He drew you in, and that's what he said about me. He's like, you draw people in, you tell a story in your music, you write music. I never wrote music. He did write a couple songs as a young man, but really he played other people's music. And so he really he buoyed me up, and he went, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, you keep playing music. Start now. You keep playing music and it will do amazing things in your life. And it just like shot through me, right? And I remember like going home and just feeling this energy, right? And getting so excited about music, but still having that anxiety. Flash forward to after he passed away. We did the funeral here in Utah. And then I had told him while he was, in hospice, I went, okay, I have this idea. And he's like, tell it to me. Sitting there with his popsicles, because that's all he could eat at that point. And he's like, okay, tell me what your idea is. And I go, okay, I think we should do a musical tribute in California about a month after you pass, and a month after everything. And he's like, yeah. And he went like this, thumbs up, that was his thing. Rock and roll, let's do it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And it was actually really hard. Because my grief hit right after the funeral, and I was supposed to, then put together this huge thing in a different state during grief, so I ended up kind of delegating it to the family that we have in the North Bay. And we put on this amazing tribute musical memorial for my dad, for the hundreds of people that he influenced and that influenced him in the music scene there, in, just in life, as a teacher, as a brother at church. He was Mr. B, he was Brother B, he was Papa B to my daughter and to his grandkids. That's who he was. And so I just knew we couldn't do it. We couldn't go without doing some kind of musical tribute. So I knew I had to perform, right? And this very interesting thing happened during that. I played music with my brother. So my dad's son, Jamie, is also a musician. And so we played a couple songs that my dad used to play. This song called the Bumblebee Song. I don't know if you ever heard it, Mike. It was the song that he played at like parties and stuff. And it was the group song, the song that everybody sang together. And so we played this song together, and my dad played in a group called The Perfect Crime, which is funny because the whole idea was that they were getting paid to do this thing. So it was to play music. So it's the perfect crime, right? Yeah. So it was him and my Uncle Hugh, who's not really my uncle, but is basically family,
Yeah.
And George, their upright bassist, and they played for 45 years, right? So me and my brother get up and play this song, and then we joined Hugh, who is still alive and playing music and doing well, and my other brother, Travis, who's my mom's son, was sitting in the audience. And afterwards, I literally felt like I had become my dad. And afterwards, Travis said, you took on the persona of your dad when you were performing. He was like, your dad, you were your dad up there. It was like all of a sudden, it was just this like thing that happened. And my daughter came up and sat on a stool next to me like I did when I was her age, next to him. And she sang a sweet song with me. And it was like everything came full circle. And I was my dad. And his legacy now lives on through me in my music. So yeah, that experience was just amazing,
I love that story. And here's the interesting thing, right? I don't know your dad. I met him I think twice. I don't know your dad, but I know your dad because I've just spent 2 hours with Katie Sellers, and I know your dad because you talk about, being on that stage and things coming full circle. And I feel like we're sitting here today and things are full circle. Here you are talking about how your dad would listen and would be very intentional and ask you what was next and what are you going to do. And then I listened to you talk about the importance of therapy and telling people like, hey, look, this is a tool for you, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that you can take advantage of. You talk about embracing the experiences that you have and growing from those experiences. And I just feel like in 2 hours, I've spent time with, and I'm so grateful for this 2 hours that you've given Mike and I, because I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot, not just about John Brandeburg. I've learned a lot about Katie Sellers, and I can tell you this, I feel like I wish I had time to sit down with John Brandeburg and get to know him the way you guys talk about him. But I'll say this, I am grateful and will forever be grateful for the time that I've been able to sit down with Katie Sellers and get to know you. It's been unbelievable.
I would agree, Tyler. Really quick. As Katie, thank you for letting us in on that. Thank you for just sharing your life, because I really think that that's where you may have felt a little vulnerability, right? But that's where you are powerful. I remember as I'm hearing your story in the retelling of February 2019, words of a song actually come to my mind. It's Closer to Love by Matt Kearney. In the opening stanza, he says, she got the call today, one out of the gray, and when the smoke cleared, it took her breath away. Mm-hmm. She said she didn't believe it could happen to me. I guess we're all one phone call from our knees. February 2019, when John started failing, he reached out and called me. I remember I can point to where I was in my house, and he called and informed me that he was losing his battle with cancer. I don't know. That's the wrong way to say it. That he was going to be dying soon, and he wanted to tell me how much I meant to him, and I stopped him because I could tell that his breath was labored, and I could tell that his words were limited, and the last thing I needed him to do was tell me what I meant to him. So I stopped him and said, John, I'm going to stop you right now. And I just need to tell you what you meant to me, right? That I was supposed to meet with you, that I was supposed to serve with you, that we were supposed to do the work that we did. I remember the night I called him to serve with me as a bishop or in the bishopric. I remember going to his house and Barbara was there, and we had a sacred moment together. And I remember saying, John, this is the gospel. We will marry people, we will bury people. Right? We're going to just love and we're going to serve. And he was all in from that moment. And he only does it all in.
Yeah.
That's the only, I mean, we talk about music. He was a passionate fly fisherman.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like the things he did 100%. Again, a magnifier.
Yeah.
Right? But I love John Brandeburg, and you're not the only person to come on this show to talk about loved ones that have passed on and saying they're still around.
Oh yeah,
they're still in our lives, right? A couple episodes ago, we had Doug McMullen. His mom and dad passed away 23 years ago, and he's like, "Yeah, they're still around." Dad gives me financial advice, and mom compliments me and tells me what I'm doing right.
No, music, especially with music, the songs will come on randomly. And, of course, like with Spotify and things, things pop up because you listen to them. But like every once in a while, a song that like he and I would sing, or a song that just reminds me of him will pop up, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, Dad, how you doing?"
Yeah, well, you keep playing music, Katie, and if you can help us connect our listeners to your work, by all means, right? Where are you at?
I'm not there yet, but once I am, I will.
Okay, well, we're on board, and we're presidents of your fan club.
Let me say this. Look, John, your dad is an honorary member of the richest men in town for certain. Right?
OG.
Yeah. Oh, he's
OG,
absolutely. Yeah. But Katie, this really is an opportunity for Mike and I to kind of be taught. And I really feel like tonight we've been taught by you and by your dad. So that's been super powerful. But we end every show in the same way, right? Tonight it'll be a little different, right? Because Katie, what does it mean to you to be considered the richest woman in town?
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's like when the brethren, oh goodness, my lights went off. When the brethren say sisters before they say and brothers during conference always makes me so happy.
It's little things, right? It's little things, but we gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, I believe that a rich life is better than just a joyful life, right? What it means to be the richest woman in town would be someone who knows that it's not just the things, the stuff that makes her life good or worthy. That it's the lows, it's the highs, it's the ebbs and flows, it's the landscape, like we talked about. That's what makes you the richest woman in town.
I love it. I will say this: I am richer tonight for knowing Katie Sellers and for learning about John Brandeburg. That's for darn sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's been a blast. It's been absolutely great. In fact, it's been 2 hours, and quite frankly, I could sit here for 2 more hours.
Let's keep going.
I feel like we say this every time, but Katie,
oh my gosh,
please come back and do this again with us.
I would love to.
You know what? And bring Daniel next time.
Oh yeah,
sounds like a good.
Hey,
dude. I will say
dude.
from my vantage point, I remember. It's interesting you telling that story because I had an interesting seat. Right, I had an interesting seat in what was happening from a distance, and John was spoke very highly of that Southern gentleman way of.
Oh yeah. He still is that way.
He was very impressed with how Daniel handled
my dad,
a tricky situation.
Yeah, my dad loved Daniel deeply. They had and Daniel lost his dad right before I lost my dad. So we have that in common as well.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It's really nice to have somebody when you're having a day, to be like, oh, I'm missing dad. And he'll go, yep, I get it. And then he does the same thing with me. When he lost his dad, I went, well, at least you have my dad. And then, he doesn't anymore. And so I actually, my dad really respected Daniel a lot. And I knew that because he was very vocal about that meant that Daniel was a really good man. So, yeah.
Well, John Brandeburg was larger than life, and you can be confident that he's larger than death, right? That he's mindful of you, that he's so proud of you right now for who you are and the mom you are and the teacher you are and the artist you are and the wife you are and the richest man in town guest you are.
Amen.
And I walk with him bouncing around in my head all the time. I could go on and on and on. And so I work at the county office. When I started my position, I started with words taught to me by John Brandeburg about Buckminster Fuller, the three laws of performance and all of those things. And I actually showed a slide. I showed a slide of John when I introduced those principles and said, you know what? Recently I lost a good friend. That good friend taught me some things. If you will give me a little luxury here, I'd like to teach you those things. So everywhere I go, I try to pass it on. I try to share the things he taught me. And he was a teacher. That's what he did. Everywhere he went, played music and taught.
Can I say this? I feel like one of the things that Mike and I have talked about on this podcast is legacy. We've talked about that idea of how we celebrate legacy and create legacy. And one of the cool unintended benefits of this podcast is really that this conversation that we've had tonight is forever.
Yeah.
And it's there, it's recorded, it's out there, and whatever that internet looks like, it's going to be out there forever. And your daughters can listen to this, and their daughters can listen to this. And there's this idea. I love the thought that generations from now, they can listen to a conversation and celebrate the person who John Brandeburg was and the person who Katie Sellers was and is. And I'm just, I think that's just a cool thing. And hopefully you feel like tonight was a worthwhile conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell you it was a spiritual moment for me tonight, for sure. So
blew expectations out of the water, Katie. Thank you.
Get it, Katie.
Wow.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Bring on the women. Let's go.
Yes.
Scrap these guys
Girl
we're talking
power.
to.
Girl power.
Who rules the world?
That's great.
Hey, that was
Katie. It's been
Beyonce.
amazing.
Yeah.
I can speak for Mike. We've loved every minute of it. Please, when we call again, don't block our numbers because we want to do this again. All right. It's been great. So.
I'll keep you friends on Facebook, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Right, Katie, have a good night.
You too.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.